All right, folks, it looks like we are live. Let some folks start to filter in here and get cracking. Welcome to Driving the Conversation. It's Daniel here on Driving and Dragons on a Wednesday, unusual Wednesday. Had some regular work stuff that preempted my stream for tomorrow night, so we went ahead and just backed it up to make sure that we do not miss this, because this seven habits to, or the seven keys, it's so hard to not say seven habits because that's where the whole idea came from. But like I said, I'm not fond of lawyers and trademark lawsuits. But the seven keys to effective TTRPG design, I'm really fond of this project, and I think it's a pretty good one to roll forward with. And I want to make sure that it's here to deliver on schedule and on time every other week with each of these seven keys. We are now, of course, down to the sixth key, and with the sixth key will come the sixth game designer who has been successful to come on and share that wisdom and share those pearls of wisdom with us, and to expound on these keys that we have. Tonight is a little bit of a special one because I think that our guest is pretty unique, even amongst the game designers that we have. They're all unique in their own ways, but he's a little bit from a different angle than a lot of them. He's very much, he's probably the most highly educated out of all of them, at least classically, but has a little bit of a different path through the industry than a lot of the designers that I've had on. I've had indie designers that went straight from player to game designer. I've had people who are just putting their stuff out there. And then, of course, folks like Professor DM, who's a big YouTuber, folks like Bear, who's a comic book guy that then, went to put out his own game and tied it back to that. But once again, a little bit of a unique path. And more importantly is he's the only designer that I interviewed, spoke to, approached, or listened to in the entire project who is solely responsible for one of the single keys. All the rest of the keys, pretty much everybody mentioned in some form or fashion. The sixth key is 100% his because he's the only one who put it into words, even though every last one of them shares it, and all of anybody who's ever been successful at any kind of project shares that key. Which, for those who don't know or haven't seen the video that dropped yesterday, the sixth key is to think abductively, which has to do with dealing with imperfect information and making decisions that are, for lack of a better expression, of your most educated guess, or the best you can do with what you have. So while we're here, like I said, we're going to get some folks coming in here. Don't forget, Corvid Codex Volume 1. It is live on Lulu, has been for a bit now. As a matter of fact, one of my local friendly game stores just picked up their first stock copies to go on the shelf. And one of my local bookstores also has it. So if you happen to be in the Tuscaloosa or Birmingham, Alabama areas, you can get it at Gear Gaming, and you can get it at Ernest and Hadley Books. Ernest and Hadley's in Tuscaloosa, and of course, Gear Gaming is in Hoover. Just doing the grassroots work, folks. We're going out there. We're talking to local game stores. We're cutting out the middleman, and your money goes straight to the friendly local game store and straight to the writers and the artists who put this book together. But fantastic 7 pulp stories. You guys know the spiel. 6 authors, 2 artists, and we're currently working on Volume 2. So I'm not going to spout off too much more about it. We're going to go ahead and get Mr. Alexander Macris on here. Of course, he is with Autark Gaming is his company, or Autark Studios, I believe. I can't remember exactly which. I'm going to have to play bad host and ask him again to name his company, but it's Autark. And he wrote developed the Adventurer Conqueror Kings system, so Axe, and then later Axe 2. Started the Escapist years and years and years ago. And really, I mean, back in the 90s was running large-scale RPGs at West Point. Went through a Harvard law education and then decided to spend that, all that wonderful Harvard education on writing games, which, I mean, that's, hey, whatever you want to say, man. Hey, that is it's kind of the opposite if you think about it. A lot of people go out there and they try to get like a liberal arts degree that's worth nothing, and they complain about they can't make success out of anything because they have a degree. And he goes out and gets like massive, one of the best law degrees you can get in terms of finding a high figure job, and says, you know what, instead I'm just going to go over here and sign myself up to make no money whatsoever making games. And but then of course when you have those habits that make you successful, they're going to follow you no matter where you go. And there is no doubt that Mr. Alex has been very successful when it comes to the gaming space, be it as a publisher, be it as a commentator, media individual, or in producing acts, which is a fantastic system. So without further ado, of course, we got Strikeout King and Stephen Kennedy in the chat. How you guys doing? Make sure you guys post, throw some supers up, or however you need to get my attention if you got any questions. But we're going to bring on Mr. Alexander Macris. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, can't complain. Oh, I guess I did forget this. 1876 Evan Williams with black cherry simple syrup and some bitters. So we got a nice little old fashioned going on today, guys.
Oh, nice. I didn't realize we were supposed to be drinking. I've just got water. I feel like I'm left out.
Well, I'm sorry. I'll drink enough for both those now.
All right, that's good. That's a deal then. Yeah.
But no, that is the bourbon choice, is 1876 Evan Williams small batch tonight. But so, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm really good. I am live from Houston, Texas. This is my first podcast or live stream since I moved. So I'm in my new digs here in the hot coast.
Well, I mean, if you'd have told me you were in Houston, I probably would have scheduled this for like 9 o'clock at night just to account for the traffic.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah, it's interesting actually. Houston is really time shifted early in the day. So, my business career was, New York initially, and like New York, it's like 9 o'clock start time. People have dinner at 7 p.m. It's not unusual, 8 p.m. Here, man, it's like work is not uncommon to start at 7 a.m. People are up at 5, 6. It's and then at 4 o'clock, the office is a graveyard, and so rush hour starts at 3:30. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, that's nuts. My godfather lives in Houston, has for many, many years. When he's in the country, he lived in Houston, and he was some kind of high level engineer for Halliburton.
Oh wow, okay, sure.
And I remember he would tell me he lived south of town somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to tell me, he's like, I needed to be at the office at 7 a.m. And he's like, he would leave his house at 5 a.m. to get to office at 7. And I was like, well, I was like, what is it, on the north side of town? So he's like, no, I mean, it's if you do it at 2 a.m, it's like a 15-20 minute drive. But it's get up and he's like, be on the road at 5 a.m. if you want to be there at 7.
Yeah, the traffic is really crazy. It really is. I thought I had seen it all, but I got one of those standing desks, and it has this weird tendency. It just likes to go up and down on me sometimes. So it just decided to go into standing mode, and I disappeared off the camera.
I was wondering what goes it's like I've got the busted chair. Every now and then I have to reach down and raise it up, but it's like is this chair sinking?
Yep. Oh, it's so funny.
It's hilarious how much traffic differs across major cities. It's like I said, you and I have both been through several of them, throughout our lives. And we were talking about that a little bit backstage. I was in Chicago, and Chicago you will lose all your hair driving in Chicago if you're not used to it.
Yeah.
They will do 107 miles an hour down the Dan Ryan, packed bumper to bumper.
That's
and not think about it. The guy behind you is kissing your bumper, and you better be on top of the guy in front of you, or they will shove their way inside. I mean, a motorcycle will cut off an 18-wheeler with 6 inches of space in Chicago.
Crazy.
and somehow it keeps moving and not everybody doesn't die. And then in Birmingham, Alabama, there can be 2 people on the road, 3 sprinkles of rain, and somebody cartwheels off across 6 lanes of traffic and ends up in the trees somewhere because, it got damp in 1 lane. And, Houston is gridlocked somehow at 24/7. And then Dallas is just, Dallas seems like a demolition derby. It's like everybody just hits each other all the way around the interstate. Just keeps going. It's like they don't stop for the accident. They just hit you and keep going.
Wow. Yeah. Apparently I-45 in Houston is the most dangerous highway in America in terms of like number of fatalities. So
It's
no,
bad.
That was bad. Yeah. I might have to buy a Tesla and just do the Tesla self-driving thing. And like, I can do podcasts or something and just let the car drive. So
do a podcast, let the car drive.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll just turn on an audiobook and just sit there and not have to worry about it because it's very stressful.
So. As a car guy, I'm surprisingly ignorant on a lot of the Tesla features. I wonder if the Tesla runs like the Nissan Leaf and has the solar panel in the back. Because I always thought if you're in the Southwest, that would be probably the best place in the universe for some of those smaller electric cars that run a lot of the accessories and stuff off of the solar panels. Be about the only place you could get meaningful juice out of one.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I was in a Tesla and I got to test drive one for the first time. And a friend's son owns one, and so he let me drive it. And the acceleration is like a rocket ship. It accelerates better than a Porsche, even though it's just a $30,000 car. And the self-driving really is magic. Like, it's one of those moments where you're like, okay, I live in the future. The car is driving me. It's pretty wild. And there's no dashboard. Like, you get into the car and there's no dashboard. It's just like this empty panel and an iPad like screen and a steering wheel. And everything is on this iPad screen. You're like, where's the speedometer? There's just nothing. It's very strange. So
I look at them and it's like I'm 100% my father's son in this kind of thing. My dad was a pilot for a very, very long time, and he's always been very anti fly-by-wire.
Yeah.
Because he was always like, fly-by-wire is great, and you got all these cool modern conveniences and stuff. He was like, I just don't like the idea that something shorts out and I no longer have control of my airplane. And so and I've had enough issues with some cars that had like a fly-by-wire throttles, in particular in the late 2000s GMs. The fly-by-wire throttles would be like 1/10 of a volt off, and it would trigger limp home mode. So you'd be on the interstate, and all of a sudden it would throw a check engine light, and you'd be tapped out at 40 miles an hour on the interstate.
Yeah, I can see that.
You got your acceleration is like 0 to 60 and never. And I was just like, I hate this. You had 14 throttle position sensors, and you never get one that finally worked. And so I've always kind of looked at like the Tesla. I'm like, this is a brilliant piece of technology. Or even the Rimac, the supercar. I'm like, this is a brilliant piece of technology. You got instant torque from that electric motor. That's why it's so quick. But I'm like, it's really heavy, so I ain't going around any corners any quick. Right. But it's also, I'm like, every single thing in this car is electrical.
Yeah.
Like, all of it is electrical. And there's so much stuff that can short out, get fried. The wrong thing gets hit by lightning close to you, and all of a sudden your car, and who knows what your car decides to do. I just have a lot of trouble trusting that.
So I was, up until last month, I had a 2008 Jaguar X-Type, and that was a fantastic car, beautiful, elegant. It's got that magic carpet Jaguar suspension, but I couldn't get it to pass inspection 3 years in a row because of just a check engine light, and no one could figure out why the check engine light was going on. And I'm just going dealer to dealer, and they're just like, look, the electronics of that era was really unreliable, and the car is now almost 20 years old, and there's just some wire somewhere deep in the infrastructure of your car that we will never find, and that check engine light will never go off. And I'm like, well, I can't pass inspection. And they're just like, and the cost to fix it was like more expensive than the blue book value of the car. So you're like,
Well, yeah, you'd have to pull the entire wire harness and probably most of the wires out of it, and rewiring a car ain't cheap. And your problem is that you lived in a state that has inspections.
Yeah, no, the inspection sucked, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're like, yep.
Yeah, I had a 2018 XE and or sorry, a 2017 XE. Loved that car. Loved that car. But I was rolling down, had 127 on the clock and was rolling down a back road, and all of a sudden the temperature shot up and it died out, and I'm like, uh-oh, I know exactly what that means. And it threw the timing chain. So I had it towed off to my Jag guy, and he looked at it and he goes, well, got a problem for you. He's like, you know how you got the 6-cylinder supercharged model? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I did that intentionally because I like to go fast.
Yep.
He said, well, here's the thing. He's like, I've never seen this happen before. Not on one as well cared for as yours. I mean, these people who let them overheat 14 times because they never fix the cooling system if it cracks, they have that problem. But, this is a freak accident. This timing chain should not have broken. He said, but if you had the 4-cylinder or you had the diesel, for a couple $1,000s, I could pull one out of a junkyard, or even for $3,000 or $4,000, I could get a brand new one. Cost you about $1,500 for me to get it put in there. $5,000 to $7,000, you got yourself your Jags back on the road. But you got the supercharged 6-cylinder, and that means I need to ship it in from England. So it's about $27,000 to land that engine here in the States. And I said, I'm going to buy a Nissan.
Yep.
It's like,
yep. Yeah, that was what I was dealing with. Like the cost of maintenance on the Jaguar every year was more than the Jaguar was worth. And so I got to the point where I couldn't afford it anymore, and I was moving across the country, and so I just let it go. And,
yeah.
Which is beautiful car.
God, they ride so good. Yeah. God, they ride so good. I mean, people, it's hard you can't explain it to somebody who hasn't owned one.
Yeah. It's like a magic carpet is how I try and describe it. Like you just felt like you're like flying. You're like, whoa.
You're just floating down the road. And then if you want to get, at least in mine, because mine was the basis for the Project 8 and the Jag sports cars like the F-Type are like this. It was one of the few places where that button where you change it from like comfort mode to sport mode actually mattered. I hit sport mode, all those lights, all my dash lights turn red, and it lowers itself 1/4 of an inch, and now all of a sudden it feels like a sports car. I can feel it hugging the road. I hit the comfort mode, it goes back up. Like I said, I think it drops 1/4 of an inch or something like that in the suspension, and it's like you said, it's like floating on a cloud, going down. I remember when I first got in the it went to the shop, and I got like a Nissan Sentra or something as a rental car. And same road I'd been driving the whole time. And I get on the road, it's like I feel like I'm going through a washing machine. And I was like, I don't remember this road being this bumpy. It's like, because I was riding on it in the Jag, and it wasn't this bumpy in that car. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, we're not here to carry on about Jags, though I guess that does fulfill one requirement, because I do always talk to my guests about what they drive and what they like to drive and what they're looking forward to, because it's kind of part of my channel's identity. Let's talk about what you got going on.
All right.
2 is the most recent thing that I know of from your company. What do you guys got in the works for Axe 2?
Well, so right now the next the ongoing project is Before All Others, which is the Elf source book for Axe 2. It's the sister book to By This Axe, the Dwarf source book. I guess it's technically Before All Others, the Cyclopedia of Elven Civilization. And then we've also got coming in a couple months Annals of the Aran Empire, which is a short fiction anthology set in the Aran Empire setting, which is like our equivalent of Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms for Axe. It's the semi-official campaign setting. So that has yet to crowdfund. Before All Others has already crowdfunded. It is about, I've got 200,000 words have been written and released, probably another 50,000 words to go. I had hoped to have it done already, but those have sort of been following the travails. I ran into some health problems and some delays and setbacks in the project, but it's good progress has been made and it's humming along. And I just started releasing some of the art for it over the last couple of weeks. Michael Sirigos, who's done a lot of the art for Axe, has been doing really amazing full color artwork for it. And so I think after that, not sure what the project will be. Have talked about doing a pirate source book, talked about doing kind of an evils source book based on the Zaharans in the game. And then we've also got the Domains at War video game that we've been working on, which takes the tabletop battlefield game for Axe and then translates into a virtual tabletop. That might get released in conjunction with like an update of Domains at War to be compatible with Axe 2. So a lot going on.
That's a pretty decent amount coming in from Axe. So tell us a little bit about Axe, because Axe is its own thing. It's not I guess it's pseudo OSR, isn't it? But it's
yeah.
It's not an OSR clone. We're not running basic with some skin swap. We're not running AD&D with a couple of tweaks. But at the same time, it's not it doesn't completely reinvent the wheel.
No, it doesn't completely reinvent the wheel. It started with BX, the basic and expert set written by Moldve Cook, which was a campaign I was running in 2008, 2009. And I slowly developed a series of house rules for BX. I rolled in some various supplementary material from other source books, fleshed out the domain game, fleshed out mass battles. And a lot of my earliest work was actually in mass combat. So what I really wanted was a game that would carry you from adventurer up through sort of this military conqueror phase and then into a ruler of domains struggling with other rulers of domains. I was very much inspired by this Conan series of books I read as a kid, where it was like Conan the Adventurer, Conan the Conqueror, but of course that same arc shows up with Beowulf, Aragorn. Like it's the traditional arc of the Western hero that has been forgotten. So I launched Axe 1 back, one of the earliest crowdfunding projects, way back in 2011, and I think we raised $12K, which in 2011 was like a tremendous success for a crowdfunding project. Very exciting.
Yeah.
And built that out over a number of years. So Axe 2 came about right around the COVID era. WotC decided to get rid of the open game license. Axe had become a very big sprawling system with many different source books, and it was kind of hard to keep the rules coherent. And I said, I don't trust WotC as a business partner to maintain the open game license anymore. I don't want to be caught in a situation where I have to pull my product out of circulation because they've changed their license. And I think my fans are like ready for something a little bit more coherent and consolidated. And so that became Axe 2. And that turned out to be a really big project. It's 3 big, heavy books, about 1,500 pages, 1 million words, written over, a period of about a year. And then since then, we've published the Axe 2 Treasure Tome, which is another 300, 400 pages. So all told, it's like 2,000 pages of content for Axe 2, which I think makes it bigger than AD&D. So it's a big baby. It's a big
pretty sizable. There's no doubt about that. So what does separate Axe from Axe 2? Given this, obviously it had to have changes to make it not fall under the rubric of the OGL. So what were those changes that made it go into that?
Yeah, a couple things. So one of the first, obviously, was the desire to get off of the open game license. And so some of the attribute names are different. Some of the class names are different. So instead of cleric, you have crusader as one example. The attributes are slightly different. We don't have wisdom. We have willpower. We don't have intelligence. We have intellect. Like magic missile is mage missile. So just minor changes to make sure we're not treading on specific copyright here and there. More substantive changes. The domain system was streamlined. The first edition system required iterative math at each domain level. So because the count would get 20% of the income of the barony as tribute. The duke would get 20% of the income of the count, but to know what the count's income was, you had to know the baron's income, and so on and so on. And so just to calculate the income of the emperor, you had to calculate all the way down to the income of the barons, which was really frustrating if you just wanted to just play at the emperor level and not worry about that. So one of the innovations was keeping the same math, but being able to remove the iterative requirement. Lots of other little streamlining in the domain system, improvements to how domain morale works, things like that. We also made big changes to thieves. So Acts inherited BX style thieves, which have D4 hit points and very difficult throws to succeed. So, 18 or higher at first level to successfully hide, 17 or higher to move silently, 17 or higher to pick locks, only one chance to succeed. Can't see in the dark, so very difficult to sneak around in the dark since you can't see, but the enemies have infravision and they can see you, like all of these troubles. And so I wanted Acts 2 to have thieves that were as good as Acts 1's fighters were, because Acts 1 made a lot of improvements to fighters with damage bonuses and cleaves and really balanced them against mages in a way that other versions of the game hadn't been balanced. So I kind of went back to the drawing board and I rebuilt thieves from scratch. One of the big changes is that now they get shadowy senses. So thieves can they can do human echolocation, they have better night vision, et cetera, and it gives them effectively the ability to see in the dark out to a limited distance. They also can choose whether to do hasty or methodical thief skills. If they do them hastily, it only takes one round, but their odds of success are low. If they do them methodically, it takes a full turn, 10 minutes, but they get a +4 bonus, and they can try again if they fail unless they've botched. And so whereas, you encounter a door and the door is locked, and in BX, if you fail the throw, you're like, well, I guess I can just never unlock this door. In Acts 2, you're like, no, you can try again, but you might accidentally jam the lock if you botch, but you can keep trying if you're willing to spend the time. So it becomes a time versus reliability versus risk trade-off of the hasty methodical choice. Sneaking is now better integrated with the surprise system, and even if you fail to sneak or hide, you still get a bonus to surprise for having made the effort. Combine that with the ability to have shadowy senses, and now thieves can actually be point men who sneak ahead, are difficult to detect by being by themselves. They can more easily surprise enemies. They can run away if they need to. They're balanced against the monsters that have infravision because they have shadowy senses. And then dwarves and elves don't have infravision, so you don't get a weird situation where every elf or dwarf is the equivalent of a U.S. Special Forces soldier with thermal optics, and the thief is like, well, I don't know why I can hide in the darkness if you all have thermal vision, right? So thief improvements, I've kind of belaboring the point, but I think bad thieves is one of the single biggest complaints that people have against BX or BECMI or AD&D, and we really fix thieves. And we had already fixed fighters. And so now, I'm really pleased because you can just play any one of the core classes and have a great time. Let's see. So we also changed the Mercantile Venture system. So the original Mercantile Venture system was inherited from the Minrathrad Guild source books for BECMI. I threw out that system and wrote a new one so that it's more tightly integrated with the economy and it plays a lot faster. It has better supply and demand, things like that. Yeah, so I would say those are the major changes. And then there's tons of just small balance tweaks all throughout the game that make it better, like little things we ran into in Acts that are fixed in Acts 2, like special maneuvers are slightly better. Initiative, how initiative works is more clarified. The relationship between cleaving and readying to attack foes has been clarified. All the little Baroque, Byzantine, weird edges have been kind of filed and smoothed and made streamlined. So, that's part of why it ended up big, is because I took the time to work through all of that and give those answers. And then, of course, it's just been expanded. The Judge's Journal is a really in-depth book that goes into a lot of detail about how do you create a sandbox, how do you create your setting, how do you build out the domains. It has exhaustive encounter tables. It's got a weather system. It's got rules for ship combat. All these things. So I think it's probably the most comprehensive fantasy RPG on the market, just in terms of like the breadth of its mechanics. It isn't necessarily the most complicated in any particular mechanic, but just in terms of sheer breadth, it can do more than anything else, I think.
It's more horizontal, and like comparing it
Yeah.
to say 3.5 D&D, it's more horizontal and less vertical.
Yeah,
It's
that's
less,
right. That's right.
less depth and crunch, like say in the vertical of the fighter, going into his feat trees and that sort of thing, and special abilities, prestige classes, that sort of thing. More horizontal in the fact that there's more rule. There's maybe not more rules for each thing, but there's more rules for more things, giving you a that's all. That was always my defense of D&D 3.5, was that the best way to use it was modularly. You only use the rules that are necessary for the world or the situation that you're in. You don't allow all the books and all the rules for every situation. And it was saying basically Axe flattening that out to make it to where that's the default. Having all the rules doesn't matter, because you're only going to use them in the situations you need, but you can't pile on top of it and break the system that way. And you use the word balance a few times. And I always differentiate with different kinds of balance in games, because you get these people who just raise hell, especially in the in the heavily simulationist crowd, who just raise hell that balance should never be a thing. Balance, who cares about balance? Nothing should be balanced. Real life is not balanced. But when I hear you talk about, I'm balancing out the thief, and making some balance adjustments and balance issues there, it seems like people think of balance and they think this class balanced against this class, as opposed to this class balanced against the role that it's supposed to fill in the game, against the environment and against the world. In other words, Thief is now worth playing because we don't have other classes that just automatically can do their job better or automatically negate their job, which doesn't make sense. Why would you ever be a thief if you were automatically going to get caught the first time you run across improvision? Why would you be a thief if 99% of the time you're going to break your key in the lock, or you break your lock picks in the lock and now it's jammed forever? There's no point. We'll just have a fighter and he can pick locks with his foot or his shoulder.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, but does that sound more along the lines, like when you say balance, it's more about balancing the mechanics against the world to develop verisimilitude, as opposed to balancing to make every character mathematically equal at the table?
Yeah, so making every character mathematically equal assumes that there's really only one type of activity that's worth doing. In 4th edition, for instance, it was combat, and they wanted every character to be mathematically equal in combat. And so you get, the outcome that they were. And so, everybody from rangers to wizards to fighters has at-will powers and daily powers and hourly powers, and all the amount of damage they do is about the same, and et cetera. The saving throws are all structured about the same. And yeah, it was perfectly balanced. But it had a certain sense of sameness. Like, it wasn't clear why you would have a class system in that regard. With Axe, first off, we don't consider combat to be the only thing that is relevant. I have this theory as a game designer that you can tell what a game cares about by how much page count it devotes to it. And so if you look at most RPGs, they devote the most page count to combat. It's the longest chapter of the game, and it's usually the only part of the game that has defined extensive rules. Most of the other stuff has very few rules. Axe has lengthy combat rules, but we also have lengthy rules for exploring dungeons, spelunking, exploring the wilderness, traveling on ships, mercantile ventures, thieves guilds doing hijinks, mass combat, right? And it's because I consider all of those to be worthy and important aspects of the gameplay. What I think of as game balance is a class is balanced is if in its niche, it is better in its niche than the other options that are not specialized for that niche. So if you're a thief and you can be out-thieved by a mage, then thieves are unbalanced. And I would argue that thieves were unbalanced in BX and AD&D because you'd have the mage would have find secret doors, detect traps, infravision, invisibility, silence 15-foot radius. And then what do you need the thief for, right? Everything the thief can do, the mage can do. There is no detect secret door spell. There is no detect trap spell in Acts 2. They've just been removed from the game.
Which is not a bad way to balance that out, which is one of the big arguments against third edition D&D, which is where my most of my TTRPG experience lies in third edition, even though I started with Cyberpunk 2020. If you look at it, a lot of the one of the primary arguments is once you get to a certain level, everybody should just be a wizard. Because once wizards get to the point, once wizards get to the point to where their daily allotment of resources is sufficient, they can just dedicate additional spells to unlocking doors, finding who needs to find traps, just make yourself invincible to them, making yourself unhittable in melee combat, making yourself able to always hit things. I mean, you eventually get to the point where even if you're extremely militant about even if you're extremely militant about the material components of spells, the XP components and everything, you eventually get to the point where a wizard in 3.5 D&D can cast Wish pretty much whenever he wants to.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like, if I can just wish for things, what is the point in me having anything? I was like, how about I just wish for 100 fighters to help me fight this battle? I don't need this anybody else really at that point. And you even see that it's kind of funny because if you read a lot of the old TSR novels, and even as they progress through a lot of the D&D based novels, you see that. Like you see that in Dragonlance, where Raceland doesn't need a party.
That's right. That's right. At the end of the thing, he's so powerful. He's just strolls in, essentially, takes out the entirety of the Dragon Lord's wizard defenders, and is like, "Yep," And then what? And then the sequel books, he's like, "Yeah, I guess I'll fight Takesis and become a god." And then
Takesis, he wipes them all out.
Yeah, and then he just decides not to do it because it was lonely when he became the only ruler.
Well, he was bored because he was like, wait a minute, I can't create anything because I'm evil. So I just get to sit here by myself and rule over nothing. And it's like, that's kind of a Deus Ex Machina too, because it's like, you just can't create stuff because you're evil.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, exactly.
I mean, that makes sense in Tolkien's Legendarian, but it doesn't really make sense in Dragonlance's. It's just kind of it's kind of the waving hand of Tracy Hickman coming in and giving Raceland a reason why he needs to go fix everything.
Yeah, that's right.
I do have a couple of chat questions here for you. One's very important about you moving to Texas. You got yourself some Ariats and a buckle yet?
No, I sure don't. I'm disappointed to report that Houston is not very like cowboy boots and buckles. It's actually a southern city. It feels more like Atlanta. Yeah, it's
and
not
only that. If you got cowboy boots and a buckle in Houston, chances are you don't speak English.
Yeah, that's probably
you true. Probably have a giant Virgin of Guadalupe on the back of your Silverado. Just saying. It ain't Dallas. And then of course, from Mr. Patty's Parlor, cover artist for our book, and just all around great guy.
Oh,
what is your favorite new system added, and what do you see has gotten the most mileage from the DMs running Acts 2?
Yeah, well, I mean, in many ways, it's the thief system, which I alluded to. I won't belabor that point. The other part I'm really pleased with is the changes to wilderness exploration. So in Acts, we used something inspired by the BX wilderness exploration system, which was just a very steady, trickle of monsters when you're moving through the wilderness. In Acts 2, we actually look at whether or not you're in borderlands, outlands, wilderness, or civilized territory, whether or not you're on a road, what time of day it is, whether you've been on the territory before. And then that determines whether you have a monster encounter, a civilized encounter, a terrain encounter, or no encounter. Civilized encounters, merchants, farmers, things like that. Monster encounters, the traditional things you expect. Terrain encounters are interactions with the environment where you get, we've actually come upon a steep ravine and we can't proceed further without scaling down this ravine, which requires climbing checks and mountaineering proficiency. Or terrain encounter, we've come upon a fresh water source, or you think it's a fresh water source, but actually it's foul water and everybody gets dysentery if they drink from it, things like that. And it's really made wilderness travel far more fun than in any prior version of a fantasy RPG I've played. Like, I love doing hex crawls now. And there's a similar parallel system for ocean crawls. And my most recent Axe campaign was a pirates game where they were doing a sort of a salt box crawl across the Amasarian Sea. And we're just having a ton of fun, like finding hidden atolls, buried treasure, sunken ships, sea monsters, all these different terrain and monster and civilized pirate encounters. It was good times. So that's been one of my favorite new systems. I love the new weather system we added, which ties into that. That's been really, really great. So yeah, I would say that's probably my fave. Yeah.
Fantastic. Which, I mean, that does sound, it's much more detailed and much more expansive, just like you'd said before, than what you got in prior games. It gives you more adventuring. It gives you more things. Like, I mean, it's nice to be like, the random table is not just bandits, orcs, gnolls, merchants, or nothing. It includes things like the bridge is washed out.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is fantastic. Cool. That's the kind of thing that it's why I've always been an advocate when you talk to of course I don't believe there's such thing in the world as zero prep, but I've always been a big believer that it's like, if you're going to rely on random tables, like to do hex crawls and that sort of thing, the random tables should not be truly random. They should be random in what I have developed for that area, what makes sense to be there. It doesn't make sense for a Baylor to be in the middle of the street in, the Shire. A Balrog stepping out from behind a tree in Michael Delving doesn't make sense. But you should always have those tables curated to the area that they're in, and the kind of encounters should also be curated. So you go in and you make your random table. It's like, hey, I'm on well-traveled roads, but that doesn't mean that a flood didn't knock out the bridge. It doesn't mean that a farmer doesn't have a fire in the barn. That's just as good a random encounter as, oh my God, bandits jumped out from behind the trees and are trying to shoot everybody with their crossbows to get their gold. But all the classic random tables, that's pretty much what they all are.
That's right.
So definitely I would concur that is definitely something that I would put up there as one of the definite improvements. And then, of course, this isn't so much a question, but Tim Joyce says that spent many years trying to house rule domains in mass combat, and Axe is a godsend.
Yeah, I mean, I spent many years too. Maybe I just have a few more years. I don't know. I've been doing it for a really long time. I started playing D&D when I was like 5 years old.
But yeah, it's definitely there you go. There's a question for you. Which strategy do you prefer for mage domains? Mages ruling over the dungeon or farming the dungeon for monster parts?
I prefer mages ruling over the dungeon. That's good fun. Myself. I mean, that was like supposed to be the reason for all the dungeons in the game, right? Like that was like the early justification we came up with for why are there all these crazy dungeons. And yeah, I think it's a really fun concept.
And it actually makes a lot of sense too, because dungeons generally do not make sense. And it's like wizards screw it around with people because they're bored and they have the power to do so actually does kind of make sense. And it lines up with why this dungeon is so incredibly solvable. Fun thing that I've heard on a regular basis from a few different people, and it's one that I happen to agree with, is the reason the Tomb of Horrors is such a pain in the ass is because it's the first dungeon anybody made that makes sense. Of course, there's not a pattern to the traps. And then if you do the thing that solved the last trap, this one's going to kill you. Because the point of the trap is to keep you out. We don't the dungeons with the easily bypassable traps don't make any sense. It's here to stop you. So why am I going to put hints on how you can find the trap?
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly. Which is why it goes into I mean, there's a lot of theory crafting here, but this is something we talk a lot about on the Axe Discord, which is the view of player skill versus character skill in finding traps, where some games theorize it should be player skill to find the traps, which requires that the game dungeons actually in some way foreshadow or give the player some reason to believe that there would be a trap. Whereas in Axe, I take the assumption that character skill is generally what detects traps. Player skill might tell you to spend more time looking for a trap in a particular area, because, this looks like a high trafficked area, or, for whatever reason, there's many, experienced players have a lot of rules of thumb they'll look to. But it doesn't necessarily require that the GM foreshadow it in ways I kind of think can be unrealistic. Like if I've gone to all this effort to put a really awesome trap in, I probably am going to make sure it's not foreshadowed. I'm going to try and make sure it's as undetectable as possible, which is why then a thief becomes key to finding it. Anyway, we could have a 2-hour talk just on that topic. So let's we don't need to,
because I think we definitely see eye to eye on that in a lot of ways. There's certain meta skill that should be there, but there's certain things there where it's like you should be relying on the character's abilities. Why have a character with these abilities if you're going to design the game to make it to where the players always know what they're looking for?
Yeah, exactly.
That doesn't make any sense to me. And I love realism in my game. I want my game to make sense as a world. It doesn't mean that magic spells and dragons are realistic, but it means that the logic, a person behaving in a logical fashion, is going to be there. The world is going to work the way it's supposed to, and people are not going to just do stupid stuff to prompt an adventure. It's like the bad guy is not going to, there isn't going to be an exhaust port on the Death Star that's uncovered that you can fly down this convenient trench on the side of the battle station to shoot a torpedo in. Because that's stupid. Why is it here? There's no reason for this to be here. There's no reason for this trench. There's no reason for this exhaust port. And there's no reason why the Empire couldn't find 15 cents in the budget to put a screen over the stupid thing. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then the second they found the thing, there should have been a Star Destroyer parked right on top of it.
Yep. It's like, there's so much of that, right? Or just they have an entire battle station the size of a moon, but when the rebels attack, they put out 3 TIE fighters to defend it, right? You're like, well, what? An aircraft carrier that's 1,000 feet long has a full squadron of fighter planes, but your moon-sized battle station has room for 3. Like, it just doesn't even make sense.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, Star Wars. So Star Wars has this problem, and I think it's really common in RPGs, and it's actually something Axe was specifically designed to address, which is this. So they want to have really impressive grand scale, because impressive grand scale makes it more awesome. So the battle station is the size of a moon, and the Star Destroyer is 10,000 feet long, and the galaxy has 1 million planets in the galactic empire. But they also want heroes to matter, and so then the battle station has to have like a thermal exhaust port that just one hero can shoot to blow up the whole thing, right? Because World War II doesn't get won because of Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy is fighting at the scale of squads and platoons, and he was our greatest war hero. So it's sort of like the desire to have Audie Murphy, but he can single-handedly win World War II, right? And so they kind of like make it work with these silly plot devices. So what I wanted to do in Axe was make it so that you have a hero and you have that grand scale, and then they work together rather than working against each other with contrived plot devices, which leads into, ritual magic, fighters commanding armies, having massive domains, running a thieves guild with legions of spies, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Audie Murphy eventually becomes Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Exactly. While remaining Audie Murphy, so that Dwight Eisenhower is in the lead tank, and
exactly.
Personally
so
goes
he
forward.
Turns into Patton instead.
Right, he personally goes forward and battles Adolf Hitler in hand-to-hand combat while the rest of D-Day is happening, right? And you're like, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Like I said, I probably should have used Patton instead, because
Patton.
Now, if there was one war hero that could win World War II by himself, it probably would have been Audie Murphy, because when you look at the ridiculous stuff in that man's history. But then again, he also fully 100% understood that being part of a whole was what it was all about. That's why he doesn't have a gold wreath on his stone. It's why he doesn't have a statue. And it's also why there's no gold wreath on his tombstone in Arlington, because he didn't take the gold, or his family knew that he wouldn't have wanted the gold wreath that's given to Medal of Honor recipients. He wouldn't want a statue. He didn't want to be separated from all the other soldiers, because he never saw himself as doing anything special, despite the fact that he jumped up on top of a burning ACP and held off in an entire division by himself. And the stunt when he the 2 soldiers he captured was ridiculous too. Dude's just nuts.
Yeah.
People need to pay attention to Audie Murphy. He's awesome.
Audie Murphy.
Let's see here. Got a couple more for you. How do you lay out your DM space when you run your game? What do you keep handy?
Oh yeah, great question. Traditionally I used a GM screen and a lot of printouts. So I on a scale of like no prep to high prep, I'm a high prep GM. It's not that I'm bad at improvisation. I'm actually a very good improviser. I used to be on the improv team in college, and I'm quite good at it. But I regard it as like a fail state, right? Like if I'm having to improv, it's because I didn't prep enough, and I like hold myself to this standard of like,
that's getting clipped, right?
Yeah, I'm sure
that is getting clipped, because that has been one of my things that I've said 100 times. And speaking of Star Wars, it's like 1,000 bros cried out and were suddenly silenced.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get why people want no prep or low prep. People have very busy lives, and often the reward for prep. I mean, I know myself, I've spent time prepping for games, and because I prep, my players perversely try and do things to see if they can get outside of what I prep for. Like for them, their win condition is that I'm forced to improv because they think that's hilarious. And my win condition is that I don't improv. And there's like this constant escalation of me prepping more and then them trying to do more unpredictable things. That said, I simply enjoy the prep. I enjoy the process of building out the world. I enjoy thinking everything through. If I hated prep, I might feel differently about it, but I enjoy it. Like I enjoy the procedural nature of it. I enjoy the world building. It's no different. Like I have friends that when they play war games, they love showing up with an army that's been beautifully painted, right? Like that's part of the hobby to them. They love painting their miniatures. I like spray paint my miniatures. I'm like, let me do 6mm so no one can see how badly painted they are. And I'll just like spray paint them and push them on the table. And they're like, bro, did you spend any time painting your miniatures? And I'm like, no, I didn't. I'm here for the game. I don't give a shit about that. So like, I'm a no prep miniature guy in that sense. So I don't want to begrudge someone for being like a no prep GM. It's
your
just
colonials.
For me personally, it's a fail state because I pride myself.
Your colonials are blue and your British are red.
That's it. Literally, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to rock. I've got a 10,000 point army ready to go. So anyway, yeah. I forgot what your question was. Oh, okay. What do I keep handy? Yeah. So I usually have a GM handout, big stack of handouts and notes. Like I like to do things like if I know they're going to find a treasure map, I'll like print the treasure map out in advance and I like paint it with coffee and then I like bake it so it's all crumply. And so then I've got like the rolled up treasure map and I'm like, you have found this treasure map, And I was pretty proud of myself, but then I got totally outdone by another GM in my group named Nick, and he just started doing just out of control, like shows up with, you know, hand painted miniatures for every villain and like complete terrain setups, and I'm like, all right, you've taken this to another level. Now you're combining miniature prep and RPG prep. I can't keep up.
Oh, and I got to respond to this real quick, and I might ask this question just out of spite, but I'm just gonna have to tell Patty that's how that was Jeff Rowe's version.
Right, what's this?
Oh, here I'll skip ahead to it right there. He said, at the risk of sounding inflammatory to Daniel, you made a tweet some time ago about climbing mountains to find Jeff Rowe already at the peak. What did you mean?
Oh, you'd have to remind me at what the context on that one was. I think it was within reference to Bronstein's, because he had a lot of very advanced thinking on Bronstein's, but I don't remember.
I mean, I thought it was just because he fell off of his high horse and landed on top of a mountain. But anyway.
No. I admire Jeff Rowe very much. He he was one of the earliest champions of Axe Domains at War, and gave the game its very first ever positive review, and likened it to the accomplishment to what Steve Jackson had done with GURPS, which I took as very high praise. And I think he's really been a positive force in terms of bringing fresh play styles to the game. So, I think the direction some of the Bro SR has evolved to play has been in favor of some directions that I personally don't love, because I think they're very they kind of start with wanting to put one-to-one time as a core pillar of how they play, and this sort of Discord style Bronstein as a core pillar, and then they sort of see what that leads to, right? Yeah. And so I take as my core pillar like objective game world, built for player agency, and then I see where that leads. And so I won't make compromises on the objectivity of the game world. So I won't hand over authorship to players, because I think that takes you out of the objectivity of the game world. So it's just my pillar. And so I get a different play style than they get because our core pillars are different. But at the end of the day, it's people that agree on like 95% of the things quibbling over 5%, right? Like I have so much more in common with those guys than like I look at the covers of the new D&D 5e and I'm like, this game is not for me, right? So
isn't that the truth? I've said that 100,000 times, that the Bro SR people who can be right 99% of the time, and the 1% makes me want to burn their entire house down. But yeah, it plays out. And oh man, I was just thinking of something. I would assume that you're probably not too terribly big on the 4D guys then.
I mean, I had a great chat with the 4D guys. They take
their play style in particular.
Again,
surprised Cappy's not in the chat right now. But
I found like, way more compatible than you would think, because when I play as a player, like I kind of am a method actor as my character. Like I get really immersed in my character, and I play. I do the voices, and I try and play as my character. I have some differences with them, because where I part ways is they sometimes want the player to describe what happens in the world. And I tend to see that as the GM's job. Like as a player, I don't like if I'm playing and the GM says, "Oh, you tell me how I kill him." I'm like, "No, man, that's your job. That's really what I'm paying you for." And then the GM says, "Well, you're not actually paying me." And then I'm like, "Well, you know what I mean." So but again, it's like I would have a great.
That's what I was actually pointing at, is that this is actually where my back and forth with the 4D crowd comes in. And like I said, I'm really shocked that Crapaphone is not in chat today, because he'd be great for this. That's my resident 4D guy who's always in my chats. They're big on co-creation, and to me, co-creation is borderline blasphemous. The running joke is a pen, because I was on Max Leal's channel. We were doing a Game Master Insight talking about it, and we were talking about we got on the topic of co-creation. They're like, well, if the player just walks over and says there's a pen and there makes sense for a pen to be there, they can co-create in the world. Well, I walk over to the desk and I pick up a pen. And my whole thing was, no, I'm the game master. If I say there's no pen, there's no pen. And it doesn't matter why there's no pen. There just isn't one. It may make perfect sense for there to be a pen, but there's no pen. And I don't need a reason for there to be no pen. My player agency as the game master is over the world. Your player agency as a character is over your character. So when you start adding things to my world that I don't co-sign, you are now infringing on my agency as a player, as a game master. That's the way I see the co-creation aspect of that. If you tell me something that you want to add to my game, like I got a player in my Cyberpunk Red game right now, who she's real big on, like, hey, I'm paying for an apartment. It's like, well, I'm going to move into this apartment in, in Little Europe. And here's the guy who's the landlord, and I'm over his bar. That's where my apartment is. And here's who he is. He's a fixer. And, he can give me work every now and then, stuff like that. And I said, well, that's fine, but you're still paying the same amount of money that you would be paying for an apartment every month in Cyberpunk Red. You're not getting out of paying for your lodging just because you happen to have decided that this is a guy you met. Also, yeah, he does jobs and stuff for you, but when you roll your regular gig income on weeks that you don't happen to be doing an adventure, doing a mission or something, maybe he's one of the guys who gives you those, but you're not getting extra money out of it. You're not getting extra. He's not, suddenly bringing you into Militech, and he doesn't have great connections with Militech, and he's bringing you into the corporation or anything. None of that crap. You said, hey, I'm in an apartment that's over this particular fixer, and here's this NPC. And I said, fine, we can have that NPC, but you're still paying for your lodging, and this is just an explanation for what your character already has. And I'm fine with that. Whereas the like I said, they tend to take the co-creation to an extent where it's like, I can just magic crap into your world, and it's like, no, you can't.
Yeah, so I take the view. I hadn't thought about the agency argument for it. For me, it's two things. First, as a player, when I'm playing in a game, I find when I am invited to co-create, it takes me out of character, and I no longer feel like I'm this character in this world. It feels like I'm an author of the world, which is a very distinct feeling. If I want to be an author of a world, I'll write a story or I'll be a GM. Like when I'm playing in the game, I want to be in the world, and I want to have the suspension of disbelief that the world exists. Which is also why I personally, as a player, I don't like it when I see my GM improving. I prefer, because then I know it's sort of being made up. I prefer it to be prepped in advance so that the world remains more real. But the other reason is that the player can never be aware of the unknown unknowns. So let's say, for instance, you enter what looks like an office, and, well, unbeknownst to you, this is not an actual office. This is a surreal simulacrum of an office that was made by aliens who don't fully understand what offices are like. And you don't know that, but that's like really important. But you as the player have no idea. So you're like, oh, I walk over and get a pen off the desk. But there is no pen on the desk because it's not an actual office with a desk. The aliens don't know about pens. All they know is like what they see in sitcoms or whatever, and they're trying. And so because of this unknown, the player has sort of like messed up the fiction of the game world. And now you have to correct them and say, well, there's no pen on the desk, right? Like, and they're like, well, why isn't there a pen? And then you can't tell them, and and it creates. Whereas if they just say, is there a pen on the desk? You say no, and then it just goes from there. So I have similar problems with a lot of other game mechanics that involve sort of co-authoring, which is that they remove unknown unknowns. And I think unknown unknowns are one of the most important parts of the mystery of being a player, is that exploration of the game world.
Absolutely. And especially if you're running like a mystery style game, because if you're running like a mystery style game, that is they create their own red herrings by doing so, which now all of a sudden, what would be a normal, like say one shot has turned into 6 weeks of game sessions, all because somebody co-created something that created a red herring that has nothing to do with the mystery that's going on.
Yep.
And even if it's totally innocent and is not a problem, because they have added something into the game that doesn't need to be there, they've messed up the entire situation.
That's right.
Let's see here. Will you update the rule set for firearms in Acts 2?
Oh gosh, a lot of people have asked for that. I guess at some point I should. It's funny, Guns of War was one of the least successful rule sets I ever did for Acts. And yet it's one of the ones that I get most asked about updating for Acts 2. I don't understand it. It must have been like a change in the player base or something. So I'm not sure what to make of it. I guess at some point I should. I kind of painted myself in a difficult corner on that one because Acts 2 uses these variable length combat rounds, whereas Acts 1 used fixed length combat rounds. And so the variable length combat rounds get real tricky with firearms, where people want to know very specifically how long does it take to reload my flintlock musket. So I'll have to think about that.
Which, and that's always kind of fun. I think Age of Sail is kind of one of the hardest. Age of Sail through, I'd say, maybe World War One is probably the hardest era to draft a game in a lot of ways. I think it almost has to be separate from like either a modern game or a medieval era game, I would think. I don't know why. It just kind of seems like that's a little bit of a difficult technological era to truly design a game for that really simulates that kind of world. Like I put a lot of thought into potentially like making like a Civil War era game or like a Civil War based game. And it's like there's so much stuff that's kind of in that nebulous realm between instant communication and no instant communication, firearms and no firearms. Like there's such a weirdness there that being able to boil it down into the abstractions that you really need for a functional tabletop game seemed kind of difficult.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. In general, I find firearms rules are hard to design for tabletop RPGs. I've been struggling for a long time to try and make my own version of sort of cyberpunk, and I've got 3 or 4 systems and they're playable. They've been play tested. I ran a whole campaign of Axe Cyberpunk, but I just don't quite think they're good enough, and so I've never kind of moved forward commercially. And I'm not. And it's weird, right? Because something about fantasy combat with swords, like hit points feel believable. Like we can have this sense of like you're being whittled down, but you're not quite dead. But then when it gets to guns, it just doesn't seem to work in the same way. And,
yeah, that's kind of what I was about to say there. I was thinking, they have that wonderful saying, God created men, Samuel Colt made them equal.
Yeah.
That's the kind of the problem when you think about it in the Hank Williams Jr. kind of thing of, man walked in with a switchblade knife for $47. A man my friend lost his life and I'd shoot him blow him away with my 45. It's like, you even have instances in history where it's like, take wow, how did I forget his name? Chris Kyle.
Mm-hmm.
Take Chris Kyle, for instance. Navy SEAL sniper.
Yeah.
Elite special forces.
Yep.
Crazy guy with a gun kills him.
Yep.
Instantly. He's done. He's level 20. That guy's level 2.
Yep.
Doesn't matter.
And it's over.
Even though there's a lot of skill involved in a gun, you look at the history of warfare, and especially when guns got more accurate, it's like sword, years of training to have great skill required and skill truly matters.
Yeah.
Gun, I'm a good enough shot to hit you. That's all I need. It doesn't matter. You can be a much better shot than me, can dot an eye at a mile away. I shoot you, you're dead.
That's right. And it only takes about, I don't know, a couple days of training to get good enough to maybe kill someone. I'm not saying you're going to reliably kill someone at every range, but it doesn't take that much training. Whereas it takes actually a fair amount of training to get good with a knife or a sword or something like that. Yeah, and particularly if you're up against a skilled opponent.
Yeah, and if you're fighting somebody with a sword, the skill of the opponents matters. If you're fighting people with guns, it really doesn't matter. The person who hits first wins.
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it. And there's spray and pray is a thing. Stab and pray is not a thing. Spray and pray is a thing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And and we all want to believe in gun kata, like Equilibrium, where skill matters. Like that's one of my all-time favorite science fiction movies, where the clerics in Equilibrium have studied every known gunfight in history, and they've mathematically calculated the probability of being hit from every position on the firefight. And so, like, during the gunfight, like the guy is just, steps, just moves like this, takes one step this way. And so like, he's able to never get hit. And it looks super cool. And then, and he just is able to shoot like this because he's instinctively memorized every possible location where someone will likely be. And so the fighting looks super cool and super stylized. And so that's, if you're willing to suspend disbelief and have gun kata type combat, then you can do something fun with gun combat. But otherwise, it's just not fun.
Well, I think that's where Cyberpunk 2020 really shined. Because Cyberpunk Red messed this up a little bit. I love Cyberpunk Red. I like running it. Mm-hmm. Cyberpunk 2020 was better, except for all of the crunch. But in Cyberpunk 2020, in the interlock system, Mike Pondsmith designed a system where he was like, yeah, if you're just standing still shooting your gun, you're going to hit every single time. You got like plus 12. You're not going to miss. Yep. However, it's designed for you to take -2 for running across the room and another -2 because you're shooting with two guns and another -2 because you want to jump over the bar so that you're running across and you're shooting with two hands and you're doing a flip over the bar. And each one of those things is also making you harder to hit.
Yep.
So you're trading all these minuses. Now you're probably not going to hit, but you're also harder
probably not going to get hit. Yep.
And you create this cinematic John Woo style combat that gives you something cool to describe as a game master.
Yeah.
But I think that was really well done. But you really have to pull a lot of the realism out of firearm combat to make it work. Because that's also a game where if you get hit, you're going to die.
Yeah, Cyberpunk 2020 was a really, really great game. That was my first love as an RPG. My very first published RPG effort was in Interface magazine and an article on GMing called "Facing the Consequences." You can go back and find it. I was 16 years old, and I met Mike Pondsmith at age 16 and ran Cyberpunk and Dream Park for him at Gen Con as a demo guy. So he was like my game god that I looked up to as a young man. And I love Cyberpunk 2020 with a very abashed and earnest love. It's one of the very best games I ever played. And
that started with Cyberpunk 2020.
Yeah, so good. So
fantastic.
It's just and it's exactly right. Like it was set up so that your guy would be, if he was sitting in the competition range, he would always hit because his skills were so good. Then it was like, okay, well, you're moving and you're doing two actions and you've taken cover and it's dim lighting and, and the flashbang grenade went off. And so you're like, well, you're at -11, but you're at plus 20. So now you're at +9 and you need a 15 to hit. So it's, 6 or higher, but you want to do a headshot. So it's another -4. So now you need a 10, but you're getting 3 shots because you've got the dual wielding Arasaka Miname 10. Oh, so good.
Oh yeah. You got another +1 because you got the laser sights. And I mean, it's, and it paints this picture of a smoke filled room where everybody's ears are ringing because the flashbang went off and you're running through the nightclub and jumping over the bar and the lasers from, even though this is not at all how laser sights work, the beams from the laser sights are pointing in all the different directions. And I mean, it creates that crazy visual as a player that just makes the game super exciting. But it definitely puts a lot of impetus on the players to know how the game works because it will slow to a crawl if you have somebody who's constantly flipping through the book to find something.
Yeah, for sure. So an aid worker loading water, he makes a good point as well. Missing attacks feels bad. I did a whole Arbiter of Worlds Substack post about this, but he's totally right. You can imagine a game where it's like you have a 100% chance of doing 1 point of damage or a 10% chance of doing 10 points of damage. And if you have 10 hit points, like what that means in both cases, it's effectively going to take 10 rounds to take out the enemy, right?
Yeah.
But one of them feels good and the other feels bad in team play, because if you do the 1 point of damage, you've still contributed to the combat that round. And so you've done something. Whereas if you just swing and entirely miss, then all that happened was you waited 10, 15 minutes for your turn to come up to do nothing at all and make no contribution, which is why the more players there are in the group, and most RPGs are played in groups, you want to have more attritional combat mechanics. And that was really, I don't think they understood that when they made D&D, because almost everyone immediately after D&D tried to do non-attritional combat, like RuneQuest, Traveler, all those guys. I don't think they understood it, but that was really the secret to why the D&D combat system worked so well, was that it made everything attritional in a way that worked really well with large groups of players.
It makes sense. It definitely makes sense, because it's one of those things where we forget why, even if that wasn't why it was done, it was just a happy accident.
It was a happy accident, I think. Yeah.
When we think back on it, we all look back and we're like, well, how can we make this more realistic about, these damages and wound scores and, hit locations and all this stuff? Why can't we look back at that? And we all kind of miss the idea of, wait a minute, this, at the end of the day, it's still a game. And you want the psychological tick that makes somebody think like, well, I didn't do crap in that combat. That was terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
So you end up having to be like one of my best players that I've got. His attitude is the thing that makes him a great player, because he has made his consistent ability to repeatedly roll ones on a D20 into the running joke at the table. Like, he had this stupid longbow that he passed down through his family of characters because they kept dying. And this bow never hit anything that wasn't an ally. And he called it old reliable. And he every single time he's like, I'm going to take 2 shots with my bow. It's like, you're going to take it? Yeah, don't worry. It'll be fine. And then, of course, 1-1 hit an ally, broke a bowstring. Yeah, whatever. But you can see a player in a situation like that where they're constantly failing and being like, why am I even here? But it's a rare attitude.
Yeah, it is. You have to stay positive when you're that cursed with the dice. I've sometimes thought you could maybe make a firefighting combat system work if you had some sort of attritional armor, like Car Wars. Like in Car Wars, you could take 3 hits to be killed, but if you wore body armor, you got an additional 3 hits. And if you imagine, Cyberpunk, where let's just say like Metal Gear just gave you 25 hit points up front, right? And so then, like, you could actually have attritional combat, and it's not entirely realistic because the bullets can penetrate the armor, or you could shoot around it, but it would be like, I think realistic enough. And then you could possibly have like an attritional system. The problem is that a lot of our gunfight fantasies also involve not wearing armor, right? Like John Wick doesn't wear armor. Yeah. He's a total badass. So anyway,
well, it's also like, and that's how Cyberpunk Red works is, your armor has an ablation value. Like, say you're wearing a Kevlar vest that has a 7 ablation. And if you roll more than 7 damage, you subtract 7, but you also reduce that ablation by 1. So the next time you just have to roll over 6 to do damage, and you'll reduce it to 5. But if you roll less than 7, it just ablates all the damage and nothing happens. I've always thought that every time you hit, it should be ablation, no matter whether it does damage or not. I think that's probably the better way to do it, because the armor is still taking damage. It did its job.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is that, when you hit, and then if you have like AP rounds or something, it does double ablation every time you hit.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they use that staged ablation all the way back as early as Mekton. The very first game that R. Talsorian did had that staged ablation system. And then in Mekton, they even had it like only certain weapons cause staged ablation, and you have to deal a certain amount to do ablate, and it like became a whole subsystem that they built. And so I think Pondsmith just really likes that mechanic.
It's not a bad mechanic. I think it can be improved, but it's not a bad mechanic.
Yeah, it's just frustrating if you run into somebody whose armor is high enough that you'll never ever ablate him, and so you can just sit there all day. And Pondsmith's argument was, well, yeah, take a Smith's Army knife and stab at a tank, and you're like, okay, I understand what you're saying, right?
Unfortunately, his numbers are a little off on that, because it turns into light up a guy in a Kevlar vest with a a Mac 10.
Yeah. Yeah, has not the
And
the
it's like,
numbers are off. Yeah.
no, Kevlar vest is not going to stop 50 rounds from a Mac 10.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and there's like human armor ablates very differently than like tank armor, right? Because there's a hardness of tank armor where like the bullet just bounces off versus like that versus the soft compression and expansion of a Kevlar. But anyway, all right, we've really diverged from the topic. So
Yeah, we definitely run off on that one, but actually all of this kind of plays into what the overall topic of the night, and definitely the topic for this second 40 minutes is. And that is thinking abductively when it comes to designing games. Why it is so important to have abductive reasoning when you are developing these kind of systems in your tabletop role-playing games, why it is so important to actually finishing your game. And I'm going to turn that over to you to explain in your words, tell me what you mean when you say that a key to effective tabletop role-playing game design is to be able to think abductively.
Sure. Well, I studied philosophy on and off as a hobby for a long time, and I kind of blundered into abduction when I was trying to understand epistemology and the basis by which we know about things. Right? Epistemology is the study of knowledge, which then led into sort of a study of what we can say about the world based on our sense evidence, and that led in turn to sort of a study of logic. And most of us are familiar with deduction, which follows the model: if A, then B, A, therefore B. Okay. And most of us who've studied logic also know that there is a logical fallacy, which is as follows: if A, then B, B, therefore A. So that does not actually follow deductively. That is not a proper deductive conclusion. If A, then B does not necessarily mean that B causes A. A causes B, but there could be circumstances of B that are not A. And we encounter this sort of thing all the time in real life. And yet, very often, it is the case that if A, then B, that if you stumble upon a B, it is in fact A. And that is, in essence, what abduction is. So abduction is if A, then B, B, therefore I abduct A. And abduction is what doctors do when they diagnose you with an illness. It's what police detectives do when they figure out what happened at a crime scene. And it's used in all sorts of other human thinking. In fact, it is very often the most common type of thinking that we employ, even though it didn't even have a name until Charles Sanders Peirce named it as such. In the context of tabletop games, it comes up constantly when a GM is forced to explain a random encounter that's just occurred, or a random treasure that he's rolled. So, for instance, the goblins have been placed in the dungeon. The GM rolls on treasure type B to place the treasure for the goblins, and he is surprised that the goblins actually ended up with a lot of platinum pieces, an unexpected amount. It was a random roll, but now it's a fact of the game world that these goblins have more platinum pieces. And so he needs to abduct an explanation for why this is the case. And it's an if A, then B, B, therefore A. He knows B. They have a lot of platinum pieces. Well, if the goblins had just raided a local temple that was renowned for its collection of platinum coins, then that would explain why they would have these platinum pieces. So that is abduction. And I introduced the concept of abduction first in an article I wrote on the Escapist in a series called Check for Traps. Check for Traps became the basis for the book Arbiter of Worlds, which is where a lot of people first encountered the concept of abduction. And then I included it as part of the Judge's Journal, and so it reached an even broader audience. And it's gotten picked up by a lot of other people. Jeffro Johnson has done some elaboration on how he uses abduction in the Bronsteins that he runs. Rule of Thule has talked about abduction in his arguments for what he calls protean GMing, which is cool to see because it's a relatively obscure philosophical concept. And I think probably the world's greatest experts and in this obscure philosophical concept are found at Cambridge, Oxford, and old school Renaissance and Axe discords. So it's kind of hilarious. So anyway, so that's abduction in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I know I think about it. I come across abduction from the world of debate is where I come from. I'm not by any stretch a mathematician, and we all know that logic is really the study of trying to boil everything down into math. That is essentially what logic is. It is a way to boil all thinking down into a set of equations. But I look at it and I say, you have deduction, which we all are familiar with. I deduct from things until I'm left with the correct solution. It gives me the advantage of always being right if done properly, and it is based entirely on known facts. And then of course, you have inductive reasoning, induction, which is more or less induction is the common sense argument in a lot of ways. I have a headache. Take BC headache powder in the past, and BC headache powder makes the headache go away. Therefore, if I go take BC headache powder, my headache will go away. That's not necessarily true. Maybe this time I take it and it doesn't go away. But most of the time, and every time I've ever done it in the past, if I take BC headache powder, the headache goes away.
Yep.
This is inductive reasoning. It's kind of the rule of thumb, or the, looking back at history to determine the most likely outcome. And then I look at abductive reasoning as that's what I'm very fond of saying whenever it comes up is this is the thing we all do every day across our lives. However, the second we decide we want to engage in some kind of project, we suddenly forget the ability to do it. And that is, I come to the house, I walk in my house, and I realize that the door was locked. I just unlocked it. My window is broken from the outside, and my power drill is missing. Abductive reasoning tells me somebody broke my window and stole my power drill. Now, it's entirely possible that the wind blew the tree outside, the tree branch slammed into the window, smashed it, and then a raccoon came in and took my power drill. That's possible. And I can't rule that out through deductive reasoning because I don't know. I don't have a camera or anything, but it's way more likely that somebody busted out my window and stole my drill. Yeah. This is an abductive reasoning, and it has the benefit of being able to find the most likely conclusion without correct evidence.
Yeah.
Or without all of the information necessary. And when I look at it from a game design perspective, and I think of abductive reasoning, I think about it as going before you go to playtesting. If you get hung up on trying to find every single variable and every single thing to make sure you have the correct mechanic that accounts for everything, you will never, ever finish your game.
It's true.
You got to be able to say, this is what will work in 90% of situations and put it together, and then let playtesters show you that 90% is really more like 30% and you need to adjust your mechanic.
Yeah. It's a good point. So, it's funny, before chatting with you, I approached abduction in the context of game mastering rather than game design. Which are obviously they're adjacent fields, right? They're closely related. But the advice in Arbiter of Worlds and the Judge's Journal is really focused on GMs who are trying to address an issue of world building where unexpected developments have occurred and they need to explain why. And so they abduct things about it. So going into game design, so one of the ways we've begun to use abduction on the Axe Discord is as a canon of interpretation of game rules. And it kind of goes like this. So let's imagine someone comes up with some edge case for a particular spell. And you think to yourself, if this edge case were handled in the following manner, would the game world be completely different than it is? Right? The game world is what it is, so therefore it cannot be the case that this rule is correct. Right? So it's almost like it's a negative abduction. So as an example would be, can you what was one of the examples that came up? And it was like, can you use Mage Missile while in can you use Mage Missile while you're in a military formation being jostled around and marching? And it's kind of unclear, right? Like, you have to have concentration. You can move when you're concentrating, but you can only move slowly. So could you maintain concentration in an irregular military formation on the battlefield? And so sort of like we went back and forth and we said, well, the thing is if you could, then you would have entire formations of people, of mages organized in units casting Mage Missile with concentration and moving around in these drilled blocks of mages, which in the canon of the game world, there's no such thing. So therefore it must be the case that you can't do that. And so like, therefore we can abduct what the appropriate interpretation of this rule is. And like, once we kind of glommed onto that heuristic on the Discord, it was interesting how often it came up. And it starts to reveal why we as nerds or geeks or whatever the term is these days can get so pissed off sometimes at decisions that creators make with their game settings. When they make particular decisions, and you're like, well, if that were true, then the game world wouldn't be the way it is. And I'll use a non-game example, but from Star Wars, like when they did the light speed ramming in I think one of the sequels, and it was like, well, if you could do light speed rams, right? Why did Luke have to go this whole thing of like the tractor beam and or the photon torpedo and trying to hit the thermal exhaust port or whatnot? Like, they had 100 fighter pilots, 99 of them died except for Luke. Like they could have just done a kamikaze run. Surely one guy on Yavin would have been willing to do a kamikaze run on the Death Star, since X-Wings can travel at faster than light speed, and just do a kamikaze on the Death Star. Like, why didn't you just do that, bro? Right? It like destroys the whole universe. And we can abduct that this was a bad decision because of the fact that the universe is the way it is. And if this was permitted, then it never would have been done that way. So I think you could probably use that. You could probably use that to build out entire layers of game design in that way, and could probably be really valuable now that I think about it. And I'm just thinking out loud. Probably be really valuable as well if you were ever doing licensed properties and you had to design a game for a licensed property. And you could abduct what the game's magic system would have to be to fit with what's shown in the game world. In the licensed world.
And I think Magic is probably one of the best examples for that.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of properties, a lot of novels and whatnot that we've read that have different magic systems. And of course, they always work the way they need to work in the world narratively because the author is in control of absolutely everything. There's no real variables in it. What he puts on the page is what's there. But it's like, if I want the magic to work like this in my game, I'm going to have these rules in place. I'm going to have to design a system that does not allow for something that breaks these rules of magic. And I think that's a very good, I guess if you're a game designer, I think that's a very good exercise, because maybe say, here's a fun exercise. Here's a game. Let's just say you have Acts 2. Now adapt these different, here's 4 books, adapt their magic system to Acts 2. Use the Acts 2 rules to create these. And you get a situation where it's like, well, I have to have these rules for my magic system to emulate that book and to have the same feeling and to have that same story. However, how do I use the Acts 2 system? How do I manipulate these spells to make sure that they work in that fashion and that it doesn't break those rules?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I've got a couple here to bring up. One, I'm going to go ahead and answer this. Like, no, you can deduct false conclusions. Yes, you can, but the assumption here being that you will always be correct in a deductive conclusion, provided that what you are using, as long as you are putting in correct information. You can't, obviously you can't make a deduction off of a false premise and be correct. You have to have correct information. But as long as the information going in is correct, the information coming out the other side will also be correct. Whereas with, say, inductive reasoning, I can put the correct in. BC headache powder can have cured every single headache I've ever had, but now I have a migraine. And when I put in the BC headache powder, it doesn't work, even though it was correct that it worked every time before that. So that's your difference there. Let's see here. Yep, that was against the established physics of the Star Wars universe. You aren't supposed to be able to affect an item in real space from hyperspace. Yeah, that's 100% correct. I mean, in this situation, we are acting on the assumption that you've only seen movies, because anybody who had any of the extended universe stuff or read any of the books or anything like that understood that that's the way hyperspace works. But if you just seen the movies and all you know is, oh, they are going faster than light speed, then you come back to the same thing where it's like, this makes no sense, because forget suicide kamikaze pilot. Why don't I just go outside and get a bunch of big balls of uranium and hook a hyperdrive up to it and just start launching them at hyperspace at whatever my target is? Though there's no way they'll be able to stop them, no way they'll be able to block them, nothing they can do to prevent them from getting in there. And I am just flinging super nuclear bombs at light speed at the Death Star. You're absolutely correct. It makes no sense whatsoever. We got here. Developer of Fallout, created Fallout, starts with the setting and the story before he starts on designing the rules to avoid narrative disconnects. And that is awesome there, Grumpy Wizard, because if you go back and you take a look at my 7 keys for highly effective TTRPG design, habit 3, think first in settings, then in systems. And this is exactly why. Because if everything goes setting first, you never have to worry about your rules screwing up the setting.
Yeah. Where I think where you get the disconnect on that is a lot of game designers aspire to create setting agnostic rules. And then those setting agnostic rules then get applied to an implied setting in the game, sort of like the generic default setting, or they get used for people's house rules campaigns, and so then you get that disconnect, and it can be very. This was a Twitter discussion I just had with some folks. It was a good chat, and I think like what I realized as a designer is that there is no such thing as a setting agnostic set of game rules. There's always a setting. Sometimes the setting is a meta setting that is lacking specificity, but it is nevertheless exists as a meta setting, right? Like the meta setting of Oriental Adventures is clearly some sort of pre-modern Asian environment where honor and karma and reincarnation are real, and there's kami and things like that, right? Like you could not use Oriental Adventures to do Celtic mythos. You just couldn't do it, right?
And you can look at that in reverse too. How many times, and D&D is the best example of this, how many times have you seen D&D try to roll out the blah, blah, blah setting for Dungeons and Dragons, the great Celtic mythos setting for Dungeons and Dragons, and everything seems to work a little off? It doesn't quite seem to fit.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't quite seem to fit because D&D wasn't designed for that.
Yep.
It was designed for high Middle Ages. It was designed for a high Middle Ages based fantasy.
Exactly.
I think that's exactly right.
And what happens is when something becomes really popular, it then gets cemented as the default setting, like the vanilla. And so then anything that diverges from that, like, oh, you're not being setting agnostic, right? Like you're like, no, I just, like for instance, Axe has sort of its default setting is more of swords and sandals than high Middle Ages. But Axe is not in any way sort of more setting specific than D&D is particularly. It's just a different meta setting, right? It's generic late antiquity versus generic high Middle Ages. But like it's no more wedded to the Arn Empire than AD&D is to Greyhawk. And in fact, I would say less wedded. Like tons of the D&D spells were named after specific named characters from Greyhawk,
Oh, yeah.
whereas not almost nothing in Axe is, with the exception of the Zaharans and the Nobirans. But D&D is such everyone's default that it gets perceived as generic in a way. So yeah.
It's true there, because even GURPS, which in its name essentially says that this is a system agnostic system. Let's be honest here. GURPS, there's some fantastic things that were done through GURPS, right? It's almost unique in its success and its enduring presence, in the fact that it is literally the only thing that was ever put out as setting agnostic that kind of stuck around and was successful. But if you look at GURPS is an unfinished game, is what they released.
Right.
They basically released they released a bag of Lego blocks and told you can build stuff out of it.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's they got some instructions on maybe how to build a couple of different things.
Right. Yeah, and and let's be fair, they did call it a game system, right? Generic universal role-playing system. So they called it they didn't just try and disguise what they were doing. But I agree with you; it's functionally incomplete, which is why they had to have, for any given setting, it needed to have its source books and whatnot. And
they literally told, like you said, they literally told the truth. They said, this is a system for you to create your own game, basically.
Yeah.
And it's like getting one of those video games that I haven't seen these in forever. They were really big in like the PlayStation era, where it was like the create your own role-playing game.
Yeah, the adventure construction set and those things. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like there is no game there. It is literally, design elements that you can put together to try and create a game. And that's what GURPS was.
What's interesting is that even GURPS, in trying to be generic and universal, it still fails in the sense that, for instance, you could not run DC Heroes using GURPS, right? Like the power difference of Superman versus, Jimmy Olsen would be too big for GURPS, right? So like just the nature of the point system, the nature of the scale that they used, those alone already define a meta setting which is limited in the scope of what it can handle. Whereas like my game Ascendant could do Superman because it's logarithmic, and so it has implications that one can abduct from the game mechanics about the nature of the world. So I say this as someone who initially set out to create setting agnostic games, and in both cases eventually concluded that wasn't the appropriate path to do, and that the game should have they should be tied to a setting while still flexible enough to use in other settings. But I think, going back to our mutual favorite game, apparently Cyberpunk 2020, Pondsmith did a fantastic job there, where like Cyberpunk 2020 on the one hand feels like a generic Cyberpunk game, but at the same time, there's this incredible flavor of the Night City setting and the corporations and, Militech and Arasaka and Johnny Silverhand that just is tremendously fun to enjoy and experience. And and gosh, and you can sit there and you can abduct all sorts of really interesting things about that game world just on like the name, like the cyberware that exists tells you, just looking at the list of the cyberware tells you about the world that you live in and how depraved it is. Like there's like the Romanova cyber legs, which are like cyber legs with built-in high heels, which tells you that there are people in the game world who are out there sort of having their legs removed to have permanent high heels. And you're like, wow, that's really extreme body modification culture. What does that mean? And then leads you to the poser gangs. And it's
absolutely, I mean, the whole thing. And what's kind of funny there is I think Pondsmith, well, I can't give Pondsmith all the credit because there's a lot of other people who were involved in turning Interlock into Interlock Unlimited.
Yeah.
But Interlock Unlimited may be the close area. Your desk is killing you again.
It is. I started gesticulating and I put my hand down on the button and now it's back to being crazy.
But, Interlock Unlimited to me, I think is if you want a system that does everything, I think it's probably the best one out there for a system that can be played in any different genre. Just because of the simplicity of the core elements that you build all of the modification around. But I can use this hat to demonstrate the problem. This is a fitted hat. It's a great hat. It goes right on. It fits perfectly around my head. I got a Ferrari hat that I wear on stream on a regular basis. It does not quite fit this well. Why? Because it is a one size fits all hat.
Yeah.
I can make it bigger for somebody with a bigger head. I can make it a lot tighter for somebody with a smaller head, but one size fits all fits nobody well.
Yep. That's right.
You will never be, there's no such thing as one size fits all plate armor. Plate armor was custom made for the guy who was going to wear it. And
that's exactly right.
Your game is kind of the same way.
Yeah.
Your game, if you're trying to make a one size fits all different settings game, you're going to have to sacrifice the ability to be really good or even truly competent at any individual setting.
Yeah, that's right.
Which, by the way, you've been told that you need training in standing desk proficiency.
Just one of many proficiencies that I need training in, man. I tell you, yeah, I'm short on many key life skills. Standing desk is one of them.
You know what? I'll bet you if I got on Twitter right now, or X, or whatever you want to call it, or really just jump to any of the different streams that are going on right now, just asked in chat, if you could choose create successful game that people that has a tremendous amount of respect and tons of people play, or ability to operate standing desk, I'm pretty sure that every last one of them is going to pick standing desk.
Yeah, probably. There's not much payoff. There's not much payoff on the RPG side, but at least you don't humiliate yourself by being unable to operate your desk.
Oh.
Oh.
There you go.
Yeah.
Which, and that is the fun thing. That's our buddy the Eclectic Goat has been big on that. I forgot the name of that organization that she's gotten tied up with, but they basically raise money for game designers and game freelancers who have fallen on hard times, essentially.
Oh,
so
really?
That's sweet. It's a great
That's
charity. I wish I could
great.
remember the name of it off the top of my head, but Eclectic Goat did a big stream on it here not too long ago.
Oh, that's really great.
Because this is what she pointed out. She's like, basically everybody who's designing a game is a freelancer, and even the most successful ones don't really make that much money. Like, we are a niche of a niche of a niche. It's like, you know, one or two bad things happening can wipe out all the success you had. And you can point to something like, you can point to Professor DM. Man, he just did a $1.2 million Kickstarter. Well, you know what? Even if he got to put all $1.2 million in his pocket, which he doesn't, he's got to fulfill books and all that other stuff with it. But even if he got to put that $1.25 million in his pocket, he spent over a decade working on Deathbringer. And yeah, that's a decent payday. I mean, that's a 6-figure salary at 10 years, but that is the overwhelming success.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Artel Saurian, who's been around forever and by no stretch of the imagination is not successful, is so strapped right now that they still have not gotten their community content policy together yet, because they're stretched so thin working with CD Projekt Red and all the other stuff. They're not, you know, Mike Pondsmith is not rolling around in a fleet of Ferraris.
Right. Yeah.
You know, the most successful of us outside of like Hasbro, yeah, I mean, they got some good money to them, but they're not, you know, they ain't Gabe Newell or nothing.
No, it's very sad. And a lot of the guys, you know, that were the creators of the space, you know, a few became very, very wealthy, but not very many. You know, the Warhammer guys, the guys that founded Warhammer, did very well for themselves, Games Workshop.
Yep.
But they're the exception. Most of the other first generation, you know, some of them are in genuine poverty and others are at best, you know, struggling middle class. The ones that did best were the ones that transitioned from the tabletop space into the video game space right at the height of the popularity of tabletop games, leveraged that, and then became successful in the video game space, like Warren Spector, for instance, who was, you know, a very successful tabletop guy. He did Top Secret, and then he bounced right into the video game space at the perfect moment, and he became very successful. But a lot, like, you know, you go to ArnieCon, you meet a lot of those creators, and, you know, relative to their creative contributions to the hobby, haven't been compensated to the degree they ought to have been in a perfect world. And I know myself, like the first year I did Autark full time, I earned 5% of what I had earned as an executive the year before. And after 9 years doing it full time, I had gotten it to where I was earning half of what I earned as an executive full time. So, and that puts me in like the top 0.1% of most successful freelance tabletop game designers, probably, or independent game designers, and probably earning a salary on par with what you get as lead designer of Wizards games. You know, like a lead designer at Wizards probably earns about what I was earning, and that's a tremendous success. And it's about what you earn if you sort of have a miserable success developing like a SaaS software platform or something, right? It's just, you know.
Yeah, I mean, people forget that all the time. Like they look at Hasbro, and I love it when these people talk about, how mad Hasbro must be about this D&D thing, or how can they deal with it? It's like what they don't seem to understand is D&D is a rounding error for
Yeah.
Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Like this is you ever seen that movie Office Space where they're trying to steal the half pennies out of the transactions and whatnot to make them, to put the money in the account. That is what D&D is to Magic, let alone the rest of Hasbro, but to Magic. Magic the Gathering is the thing that matters over there. And then you look at like Paizo. Paizo was number 2 for a long time.
Yeah.
And it was it was completely crippled and may die over the diamond distributing scam, which is kind of funny because it almost mirrors TSR. A whole lot of banking on the future is the reason they're screwed, because they had all that inventory tied up with diamond. But it's the same thing. We're a niche of a niche of a niche, and being a super successful TTRPG player is like, or super successful TTRPG designer is like being a really great WNBA player versus being a bench warmer in the NBA.
That's right. I'm the Sophie Cunningham of tabletop RPGs.
There you go, the Sophie Cunningham of tabletop RPGs. There we go.
Did I get her name right? The point girl.
That's her. That's Sophie Cunningham.
Yeah.
Her and Caitlin Clark, the only reason anybody watches the WNBA at all. They actually had 4 million viewers on TV ever for the first time period for WNBA. And you look back at it, and every single game that was over 1 million viewers on TV was featured the Indiana Fever.
Really? Yeah. I actually know almost nothing about it. I just saw all these hilarious memes where it was the Sophie and like her pointing, and then like all these funny memes about it. So I had to like look up, see who she was.
She and her shooting guard are the only reason that anybody watches the WNBA at all. Like the WNBA has been subsidized by the NBA its entire existence. It's been deep in the red every season.
Gotcha.
But people are showing up to watch these two particular shooters, or these two particular players. And Sophie Cunningham, don't get it wrong. Are you familiar at all with any hockey terminology?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up as a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, so
there you go. I won't hold that against you. Sophie Cunningham is a goon. She is a mediocre player.
Gotcha.
Her whole job is to beat the crap out of people and foul the crap out of people who hit Caitlin Clark. Because Caitlin Clark does something that nobody else in the WNBA does, which is knock down threes like they're falling off of the cherry tree.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yep. She's like the first like legitimately good player in the WNBA. And so people show up to watch her, but a lot of jealous people on other teams like to foul the crap out of her. So they hired a center to go pick fights with people.
Got it. So Pittsburgh Penguins, we had Mario Lemieux, who was, an amazing player, but he was constantly being targeted. So we had goons to defend him. Yeah.
Same thing. Sidney Crosby has the same thing these days.
Got it. Okay.
Well, I think Crosby's still around.
Yeah.
But
well, you got to defend the Magic user. That's what you have fighters for, right?
You do. I can't remember who it was that was around Gretzky, but Gretzky was like, we'll have an entire team of goons and just Gretzky, because he'll do all the points we need.
Yeah, that's right.
But we're gonna make sure that he doesn't get cross-checked too often.
Yep. Yeah, you have to, right? Because it's really easy to get injured, and then your star player is done. So
yeah, absolutely. Don't you love how hockey treats injuries like they're the Kremlin? it's the funniest thing ever. It's like you'll watch football and it'll be like, oh, he's going to be out for 2 games with a high middle ankle sprain. And baseball, it'll be like, well, he has a swollen third knuckle, so he can't pitch this game. And then it's like hockey, it's like he has an upper body injury. He'll be back sometime. It's like upper body. What's wrong with him? Upper body injury.
Yeah.
We're not telling you where it is.
Yep. You have right, because otherwise they'd be targeted again, right? That's why.
Exactly. It's like you tell him he's got a blown ACL. Next thing you know, the guy's getting hooked every other time he comes around the ice.
Yeah. Brutal sport.
Great sport though. I do love me some hockey.
It's great I think it's the most fun to watch. Like I'm not. This will surprise no one. Like I'm not an avid watcher of sports. But I have to say, like, I genuinely enjoy watching hockey. That's probably my favorite one to watch. It's just the action is very, very fast. There's lots of goals, and there's just the brutality. It's like getting to watch a Roman gladiatorial match. It's great.
I do love, well, especially since the advent of high definition cameras.
Mm-hmm.
That has made hockey a lot more watchable because it was really, really easy. Like in the like if you were trying to watch hockey in the 90s, it was really difficult to actually follow the puck. You couldn't see it. And then they started doing that stuff where they would have the streaker on it. Like they'd have like the yellow streak that would follow behind the puck to follow it. And it's like watching Tron or something with the thing bouncing all over the place. But once they got high definition camera where you could clearly see what was going on, hockey just was super exciting to watch, especially on TV.
They're doing the streaking now for fencing, and it like makes it seem way cool. I did fencing in college, and it wasn't that cool. But now that when you add that laser streaking on the fencing, I'm like, this is the coolest sport ever.
This does look awesome. I remember when I studied under Bruce Bazzoco, who was the fencing coach for the U.S. Olympic team.
No shit.
And he actually did 3 matches with Bruce Dickinson.
Wow.
But he and I were talking one time, and he was talking to a group of us that were there, and he was talking about how it's the running joke is that the fencers were the least athletic. The foil fencers are the least athletic of all Olympians.
Yeah, I was a foil fencer. I can attest to the limited athleticism.
Oh, well, now epee fencers are a different story because they're sitting there lunging out like, they're lunging out like 56 inches trying to lean out there and hit somebody's toe, but
touch you on the toe, and you're like, well, that was a lethal toe wound. You've lost.
Yeah. And then you get to foil fencers, especially because most foil fencers are French school. Yeah. And French school is just like, I'm going to stand right here. I'm going to do this the entire time.
That's what I was taught, French school. So we're just like,
I mean, yeah, it's all on the wrist. It's all right here.
Yep.
And it's like you do nothing. It's like some big fat guy, but you can't touch him because he's got an amazing tip control.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
And then you get some Spanish school guy, like a Spanish school fencer, and the dude's bouncing off the walls like a kid on 6 pounds of sugar and 6 Ritalin.
Yeah, I was kind of like, once I saw a Spanish school, I was like, I really think that would have been way more fun to learn, but I didn't. I learned the French school. The Spanish guys looked like they were just having way more fun fencing than I ever did.
Oh yeah, they were a blast. But yeah, there you go. The number one cause of death in the Middle Ages, toe wounds. You say that, but when you look back at military history and you realize how many actual deaths caused in combat and warfare came from, I got a glancing blow on my shoulder and now I have gangrene and you got to cut my arm off.
Yeah.
It's like you realize how many people died from gangrene.
Oh, it's just awful. Yeah. Every time I read military history, I'm so grateful to have antibiotics because just brutal. So,
all right, I got to ask about this. Who is an IFRPG pro?
Oh, one of the guys you skirmish with on Twitter all the time is.
Well, I know that guy, but I'm wondering who on this channel, who around here is Mr. IFRPG, because I know I'm an IFRPG pro. I'm actually the Supreme Grand Gold Great Worm champion from the Ultra. I'm from the SIFRPG. The losers in the IFRPG, they have to get invited to join the SIFRPG, and none of them are good enough. We get taken down to a secret D&D tournament in the Bahamas. We have to hide all the information about it so we don't get killed.
Wow, that's awesome.
Wizards has a bounty on my head for being the SIF RPG champion.
Man,
Yeah.
that's out of control. I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know.
Yeah, you didn't know it was that serious, did you?
I didn't know it was that serious. Yeah. It's
Well,
I mean,
anyway.
really, there's just so many tiers of elite gaming within the circles. I can't keep up anymore.
That's right. Yeah, the absolute supreme elite gaming. Yeah, I even got this custom T-shirt that you cannot get anywhere else. Go find it. Go find this shirt on the D&D site. This is only for SIF RPG champions.
That's awesome.
It certainly was not made by one of my players whose employee has a T-shirt company and found out that we play our game at the company conference room.
Well, I mean, it sounds like that. So what you're telling me is that the SIF RPG has its own T-shirt company.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm hearing. Yeah,
that's right.
That's what I'm hearing. So.
Well, anyway, we'll let you guys all use your own abductive thinking to find out just how much the IFRPG exists. But anyway, what else you got for me, man?
I got to jump. Yeah, it's time for me to turn into a pumpkin here. I'm actually supposed to do another podcast with an old buddy of mine named James Young from West Point, and talk about oh gosh, I've forgotten the topic, and I'm a bad person. Appeal of Rome and Greece in alt history.
Ooh, now that right there sounds like fun. The appeal of Rome and Greece in alternative history. That actually sounds like something I might want to listen to.
Yeah, it could be all right. Yeah.
Yeah, if you got a link, you can drop it in the chat. But or drop it in the private chat, and I'll make sure it makes it into the chat. But
yeah, he records it and then puts it up. It's not a live stream, so.
Well, get it to me. I'll make sure it makes it into the description.
Cool.
But is that him right there, Mr. Gibson?
Yep, he's waiting for me.
There you go. Get on over there. Well, anyway, tell people where they can find your stuff, where they can buy your things. Of course, you can buy my stuff at Lulu.
As you should.
You
can get my stuff at autarkemporium.com or at DriveThruRPG Autark channel. The Emporium has our inventory from our Kickstarters. So if you want the offset printed books, you go there. DriveThruRPG's got the PDFs and the print on demands. Anything you buy in Autark Emporium, you get the PDF delivered to you from DriveThruRPG as well. You can also follow me on X at Archon and on Substack at Arbiter of Worlds.
Fantastic. Well, Mr. Macris, I appreciate you for coming by.
Thank you so much for having me on, man. This was a really great chat, and I love that you're a Cyberpunk 2020 fan. So,
hey, we all got to start somewhere. I just started at the top.
It's such a great game.
So. Absolutely. Well, anyway, hope to have you on again sometime. We can have a little bit more chat about this kind of stuff, and
that would be great.
Do a little bit more deep dives. But for now, everybody, you guys have a good one.
Thanks again.